A very warm welcome to yet another Chris Kumekucha video. Karibu sana. Now, I always endeavor to ensure, at least I try my best, that every video you take in, you will go away with new information you never had before. That is what I always work so hard to achieve in each and every video I produce on this channel. Now, during the second liberation of our country, the media played a key role in informing Kenyans, educating Kenyans. Our Kenyan media were real heroes of the second liberation. But today, our media are a shadow of their old self. Many things have changed. So that if you take in local media today, pick up a daily newspaper for instance, you will tend to get very confused. Now, I'm a former journalist. I've been inside a newsroom. In fact, newsrooms. And therefore today I bring you secrets of the media you never knew. I reveal the political outfit which led the charge in infiltrating and influencing the media so that today they are no longer unbiased and balanced. I am sure that revelation will shock you because it's not who you think. Sadly today, corruption in the media is rampant. How can we expect them to inform Kenyans about how some people do not even qualify to vie for the presidency because of their corruption track record? How can we expect them not to promote certain individuals without shame in the media and give the impression that actually there's no problem electing those people because all politicians are corrupt? That's the rhetoric. Can the Kenyan media be saved? What has the Kenyan media gotten all wrong concerning the current developments at Sagana? Get all these valuable nuggets of information and much more in my show today. Karibu sana. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for making the time. Kenyans are generally very smart people. Of that, there's no doubt. And there was a time when Kenyans were very well informed on local politics, extremely well informed. You would walk into any drinking place or where people are discussing politics and get a very accurate view of what was really going down. Those days are long gone. But Kenyans are still very smart people, maybe even smarter these days. So what changed? In one sentence, the Kenyan media changed. A very busy Kenyan who wants to quickly catch up with what's happening locally and purchases a copy of a popular Sunday newspaper. At the end of his read or her read, they will be totally confused. And I'm talking about an older Kenyan, somebody who totally understands our country and its history. When you talk about the rookies, the people who are just out of school, people who don't know Kenya well, then what will happen is that they'll pick up headlines and stories from the Kenyan media, and you will see them repeating those phrases in comments, even on this channel. Word for word, almost. Those comments will be on social media. And you really can't blame them. Of course, what would have helped a lot is if our media invested heavily in thorough analysis and investigative stories to make things clear to Kenyans. For instance, what does it mean for the president to host 555 members of county assemblies from right across central Kenya? What does it really mean? Well, members of county assemblies are not members of parliament, covering huge areas. They are not the kind of representatives who are based in Nairobi and go back to their constituencies. Rarely. Indeed, some don't even go back to their constituencies until the next elections are around the corner. No, that's not a member of a county assembly. A member of a county assembly is right there on the ground. They have to attend sessions in the local county assembly. When you gather members of county assemblies, actually, you're right there on the ground. If you can succeed in influencing a member of a county assembly, you have changed things on the ground. Because these people are with the people. They know which buttons to touch to turn the people in a certain direction. And so in my view, it is very misleading for a journalist to say that, the people attending Sagana are mostly pro-BBI people. That is not a fact. Think about it for a minute. 555 members of county assemblies from central Kenya are all pro-BBI. Does that sound true to you? No, it can't be. And because these members of county assemblies went to Sagana, some against, some for the BBI, or shall I say very few for the BBI, it becomes very easy for you as a journalist to see the story. When you hear how those people are talking in Sagana, okay, I appreciate that not everybody can manage to have insiders in Sagana. I appreciate that. But if you're a journalist, surely, in my view, you don't have an excuse for not having somebody. I have a few insiders right there, inside, during the proceedings. And that is why I don't have to open the daily newspapers to find out what is going on there. If we were still in the 70s, 80s, 1990s, the situation would have been very different. Because journalists would have been competing to see who will get a scoop of what is really going on inside Sagana. We would already be seeing in our newspapers verbatim quotes from what MCAs are saying in Sagana. Closed door meeting. And sadly, these days, I don't even hear journalists using those words. Scoop. Exclusive. It's only you who has the story. And that is why many people have called our local media, it's very cruel, but it seems to be true, they have called it the press release media. It means a journalist waits for a press statement from a politician. Then he picks up the phone and calls that politician's opponent for a comment. And then they write their story. In a comfortable air-conditioned office in some building in Nairobi. And they file their story, get into their car, and drive to their home somewhere in Kilimani, or Karen, or Lavington, or even Muthaiga. In my view, that story should never have been written. And if it was written, they would have just written a small piece about that press release, and then taken time to go out and gather facts. Because whatever they have written is not news, it's predictable. Because that politician who issued that statement It was a hard-hitting statement against the opponent, very predictable. And when you call the opponent is going to hit back, very predictable. So where's the story? I don't see. When I was a journalist, I would never dream in 100 years of asking for security to go follow a story in Kibra or Madare slums. But that is what journalists do today. In my days as a journalist in the local newspapers, some journalists lived in Kibra, not in the slums, but at least very close in the periphery. Many journalists lived in Eastlands, Jericho, Buruburu. So if they had to follow up something in Kibra, no problem. Yeah, they just walk across comfortably and they mingle with the people. And guess what? Those places where journalists need security, to go once in a while, that's where the real stories are. Stories that can sell newspapers. But let us back up a little. Where did things start to go wrong? Let me start by giving you personal stories. Things I witnessed myself, not told by anybody, not told by a source, witnessed myself. I was there. From a very young age, I always wanted to be a journalist. And as I was doing my Form 5 and Form 6 in those days, I was already plotting how I was going to enter the journalism profession. I started bothering this teacher, to introduce me to contacts in the journalism profession. And indeed she did. She introduced me to one person, whom I shall not name, very famous journalist, who had left the profession to go into the public relations field. And that man didn't help me much. But I didn't give up. And I tried several times and failed even after I'd finished school. Then one day, I heard that a local newspaper was looking for a film critic. Now, I had always loved movies. I knew a lot about movies. And so I went for the interview. And the editor was interviewing me, who knew a little about movies, was impressed. And so they took me to the second stage of the interview process. They got me into a movie preview for the press. I sat down, watched the movie, and wrote what I believed was an excellent piece. But before submitting it, my instincts told me to consult a friend, who had worked in the British press previously, and was in the country coaching rugby. And the first thing they told me shocked me, because I hadn't realized it. He said, "You realize you're the first non-Mzungu movie critic in the country. And so you're going to be judged very harshly. Your piece has to be better than excellent." And so I reworked my piece. And my editors were very happy. And I got the job. And that is how I got my foot inside the journalism profession, where the shock of a lifetime awaited me. When for the first time I saw the raw copy handed in from some of the most famous journalists in the country. It was all written in a language other than English. I kid you not. But it was full of very valuable content. And so this raw copy was rewritten by a sub-editor, reworked completely. Of course, keeping all the valuable content intact. And then that journalist, who couldn't construct a single sentence correctly in English, got the byline and became famous in Kenya. Famous journalist. And this discovery, mind-boggling discovery at the time, helped me solve a mystery of something that had happened to me earlier. I had submitted a short story to a local women's magazine. owned by somebody who had worked in the daily press before. And when I came back for a verdict, that editor told me, "Please be honest with me. Where did you copy this story from?" I was offended. "What do you mean?" I shot back. They said, "Well, you've put in a few Kenyan names, you've put in Kenyan things, but this story, there's no way you'd have written this story. It's not an original story." And I was so offended, so annoyed that somebody would even think that I stood up and demanded my story back. The editor looked at me and said, "Relax, we're going to publish it." I was just confirming. And that man used to be a sub-editor with the Daily Nation. And this new information immediately made me understand where that editor was coming from. He had been a sub-editor with the Daily Nation. He had spent his lifetime translating stories into English from something which was close to English. Anyway, once I was inside the newsroom, I could really get going as a journalist. I did all kinds of stories. Sports, news, hard news, and I learned a lot about journalism. And very important for our purposes today, I learned how a newspaper works from the inside. A few years later, I helped some people get into journalism. Not one person, not two people, several. One man I knew very well, we went to the same primary school. The others were total strangers. Some of them are still in the profession today. And in those days, the typical person desperate to get into journalism was not after making a lot of money quickly. No, they had a passion for the profession. They had a passion for writing. They understood that the most valuable asset of a journalist was not how well you write, but your character as a man or a woman. Integrity was number one. Integrity was number two, number three, number four. And then number five came other skills. And six and so on, like writing, investigative skills, etc., etc. A very sharp contrast to these days. Because these days to become a journalist, you need to go to university. And most people who end up as journalists from university, end up as journalists by chance. Others who go to journalism schools still don't seem to have a passion for the profession. Or if they do, their much bigger passion is making a lot of money as quickly as possible. They are a very sharp contrast to a man I consider one of the greatest journalists we have ever produced, the late George Mbugus of the Daily Nation. George Mbugus started out in the 60s serving tea at the Nation. And then he started writing for Taifa Leo, the Kiswahili version of the Nation. And his amazing talent for smelling stories, big stories, that would sell the newspaper was identified. And Mbugus did not have much formal education. But soon he was the managing editor of Taifa Leo. And at this juncture, because everybody needs money, Bwana Mbugus would have found a way of making quick money. Taking money from politicians, to slant stories in their favor, etc., etc. But the character of the man refused. And very soon, he became the group managing editor of the Nation, where his skills of smelling a story and finding stories that would sell a newspaper became very obvious to everybody. And also, his ability of thinking outside the box. It is amazing how in those days, journalists worked under very difficult conditions, but were still able to produce much better content than journalists today who have everything and less restrictions. And following in the tradition of good journalism, Bonambugos would print a story when he knew the facts were correct and face the consequences later. He was a very courageous man. I don't know if we still have courageous journalists. I don't know. And when he printed a very sensitive story, he had a certain protocol in his office. He had a secretary. So he would shut his office and instruct his secretary to tell anybody who came in or even called that he was not in the office. And then he would communicate with his secretary through notes slipped under the door of the locked office while he was inside. But one day Mbugos printed a story that was too sensitive. I believe it was based on a very hard-hitting statement from a man called Bishop Njoya. And by this time, his secret of locking himself inside his office had leaked. Moi had his spies everywhere. And so he didn't come to the office. That day he worked from a bar somewhere near Parklands, using a call box. There are no mobile phones those days. Call boxes were the public phones where you put coins inside and you speak. And when the coins run out, you're disconnected. And so several times during the day, when he called his secretary, he was told a large group of policemen had been to the office asking for him. But that didn't bother him much. He continued working as a journalist. And from that call box, he gave instructions for the next day's newspaper. Large headline, 160 points. Put the photograph above the fold, etc., etc. He gave those instructions. And meanwhile, he was getting feedback on how the sales of that controversial newspaper were going. They were good. And then the next day he put on his best suit and went to see the PS internal, at that time a man called Hezekiah Oyugi. Of course, after putting all his affairs in order, knowing that he was going into political detention, without trial, of course. And he sat outside Oyugi's office and waited, expecting policemen to burst in at any minute and arrest him. But to his utter surprise, when Oyugi came out, he said, "Oh, we have been looking for you everywhere. Yesterday's story, it was very bad. But Mzee loved your headline today and your story. You can go back to your office. Hiyo maneno meisha." George Mbugos, a legend of a journalist. When will we ever get another one like him in Kenya? Oh, I consider myself very fortunate because not only did I meet George Mbugos in person, I worked with him for a very brief time at the Nation. But I hope it was enough time for some of George Mbugos' character to have rubbed on me. Now, I was recently informed that our local dailies have reversed their policy, which brought in all this disaster, of not hiring anybody as a journalist who does not have a university degree. Which was a good thing, took away all the hard work from the sub-editors rewriting copy, and maybe even improved the quality of English in the dailies. I don't know. Some people say no. But what it did that finished our local press was that it removed passion out of the profession. And it became just another profession, where you can easily find shortcuts to make quick money. Something that today even extends to social media journalism. We have people with YouTube channels who are very well financed by certain politicians. And they pretend that they are balanced, that they are not biased. But of course they're not objective, because he who pays the piper, they have to follow the objectives of the person who is paying them. And it is easy to be fooled because some of these channels seem to have a lot of inside information, political information. Now, there's something else that influences the stories that go into newspapers, and these are public relations companies. There was a time I left the journalism profession to go into public relations. Yeah, the money attracted me, like it did many journalists. Looking back, it was a very useful experience for our purposes today, because I also saw things from the other side, the people who try to influence the media. And I discovered that the image of a business, the image of a company, favorable one, is much more powerful than advertising. Yeah. So our work was to get our client mentioned in the newspapers, maybe get a feature story on something interesting about that company in the daily newspapers with photographs, etc., etc. Because, for example, you can book an ad in the media about your latest Toyota vehicle with an advanced engine. But it will not have the same impact as the story of a farmer who has bought a pickup with that new engine and it has changed their lives. They're able to get their products to the market. Even when it rains, the vehicle has no problem with the bad Kenyan roads. And your story highlights how he was not able to get his vegetables to the market whenever it rained, but now he has no problem. Even if it rains and floods, he is still able to use his pickup to get his vegetables to the market and get an income. And you write that story, it's a feature with photographs, much more effective than any advertisement carried. Now, the disaster that has befallen our media is that these days we have editors, journalists, who are still on the job as journalists, but they also double up as PR consultants for certain politicians. So they end up writing their headline, thinking of a big, fat, brown envelope full of cash. And now that you have this information, carefully read through the headlines of your daily newspaper every day, and you'll quickly notice, the PR pieces, very positive stories and headlines on a certain leading politician with ambitions to be president in 2022. And you will never guess who introduced this culture into our local journalism. It was the ODM party, Orange Democratic Movement party, during the Kibaki days. To be more specific, at around the time of the 2005 national referendum on a new constitution. And things got so bad for President Mwai Kibaki that he was reduced to carrying around large speakers and addressing Kenyans directly, countrywide, on his policies, on what he was doing, on what he hoped to do if he was elected to complete a second term in office. Because all leading editors in our media were pro-ODM, pro-Raila Odinga. Fast forward to today, and it's very easy to see where our local media, especially the daily newspapers, are leaning, especially when it comes to the 2022 race for the presidency. Many times, I read the headlines in a local daily, and I can't believe I'm reading the headline of a local, respectable daily newspaper. It sounds like the headline from a press release from the said politician. And the story reads very much like a press statement, verbatim from that politician. And this is being peddled as news. Front page newspaper news. Yeah. And it becomes very clear, to somebody who's very observant, that actually this is a promotion for a certain politician. They must have paid for it. And if that money they paid to the newspaper did not go to the newspaper coffers, it definitely went inside somebody's pocket. The character of a journalist in Kenya today. And then the same journalists have the audacity to write about corruption in government in Kenya. How now? Little wonder that newspapers in Kenya are really struggling. It is not because of technology. Yes, that's part of the reason. It's not because of the internet, which has changed everything, social media, etc., etc. All those are peripheral reasons. The main reason is integrity has vanished from journalism. Because a typical Kenyan reader may not know much about how the press works, but they can certainly sense when a newspaper is printing rubbish. They can certainly sense when a newspaper turns into a press release daily. And all the major newspapers in Kenya today own TV and radio stations. And that is why the best source of political information are actually interviews with politicians. Now, unfortunately, I never get enough time to take in a lot of radio jumbo. But in my opinion, this is the best radio station covering politics. They are doing an excellent job, and they stand head and shoulders over the entire Kenyan media. And I wish we could have more people like them. But sadly, people are very busy these days. It is very difficult to find the time to sit through talk shows on TV or to listen for long periods of time to Radio Jumbo. It's very sad. And so most of the country remains politically ignorant. Mainly because our mainstream media has failed us. And they've failed us at an hour of great need. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate your like. And if you're a new subscriber, I warmly welcome you to the Kumekucha family. And if you're not yet a subscriber, I urge you to subscribe. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.